From the Green Room Studios at Bates Nursery in Nashville, Tennessee, it's the At Home Show podcast edition. Let's get into this week's show.
Welcome in episode 2, everybody. We talked about a lot of fun facts about plants. So, Austin, what were some things that we discussed?
Lots of hydrangeas were on the list.
Again?
They're
Man.
blooming. They're just blooming like
It's
crazy.
a hot topic right now,
I'll tell you what.
hydrangeas.
And you know what? It's not a very hot August so far. So far.
It's been fantastic so far. It makes me want to start planting fall vegetables.
We talked about that.
Did we now?
We did.
Yeah.
Here at the nursery at Bates, we're going to be bringing them in. You know what? We're getting a few today or tomorrow.
I believe we are. That's
Is that
exciting.
right?
Yeah.
Sooner than I expected.
It's going to be minimal. It's mainly what I heard is lettuce, some greens, and broccoli.
Do you like broccoli?
I like broccoli.
But you hate beets.
I don't like beets much. You know what I hate about broccoli?
What?
Cabbage moths.
Well, what do you
Yes.
do about that? Because that is terrible, and that's why I don't grow them.
I've done a lot about it.
Yeah, it's really annoying. Scouting is usually my key. If you can get them big enough, you know, where the cabbage moths and worms don't just terrorize them whenever they're small.
The plant itself big enough.
If you get the plant big enough, yes, then usually can be okay, and you can grow them here just fine.
I grew them one year and they got kind of gross with all the stuff on them, so I gave up.
I know.
But
It's
maybe
really,
with your hot tip here, I'll try it again.
yeah.
I've had the best year ever for broccoli and lettuce and all that just by using some insect mesh netting.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That is very helpful with moths that come in to lay eggs.
Yeah. I threw it over there while the plants were young, soon after I'd planted them with some bamboo stakes, and everything was super clean and healthy.
Nice.
I was amazed.
Speaking
Love
of
it.
clean and healthy,
Didn't even use BT.
this nursery right now is looking real clean and healthy.
Yes, it is.
So many plants coming in
Seriously.
every day. Lots of trucks, lots to see.
Gearing up for that fall rush.
Yes, we are.
Well, let's gear up for this past week's episode. What do you say?
Here we go.
Let's get it.
I'll bet we have tons of questions this week.
Oh boy,
We do.
do we.
Okay. Is there a
have so
theme
many.
that we have in the questions, Caroline?
I think the theme today is just a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, just a lot of questions.
A plethora.
A plethora of questions, if you will. So let's
Okay.
go ahead and get to it. We have
Okay.
quite a few hydrangea questions this morning, which I know
course.
Austin is probably quite excited about. I have an old, huge oak leaf hydrangea that's about to eat the end of my 2-story house. When do I need to cut it back, and how much can I cut it back without killing it?
This is about the biggest one I've ever heard described.
Yeah,
Yes.
eating a 2-story house. That is a
Okay.
big one.
Yeah, it's probably never been pruned. Okay, so you're not going to hurt it by cutting it in any way, to be honest with you. You could take a chainsaw right to the dirt if you wanted to. Now, you're going to sacrifice blooms if you do that, okay? Oak leaf hydrangea also blooms off old wood. So we need some of that wood to stay up, you know, over the wintertime to produce, you know, flower buds and, you know, flowers for next summer. But if it's getting that big, sometimes you can just sacrifice blooms for a season, okay?
Right.
Like, give it a whole total restart. Truly, you could cut it in half and it's going to be fine. But literally, you could cut it to the ground and let new stuff form, new leaves, new stems, and it actually like is more vigorous when you do that. So you get all this new growth from the ground that's all clean and green. And like I said, you're going to sacrifice your blooms for next season, but it'll give you a plant that is way more in check, and it's going to be a lot healthier if you do that.
After the pruning, do you fertilize normally?
You can if you want.
Okay.
I mean, a plant that big is obviously very happy where it's at. So
Okay.
you got a good site, a good location where you put it, and it's gotten huge on you, which is kind of what oak leaf does. So that's good. Like I said, you can certainly fertilize. It never hurts to, you know, add organic matter back to the soil in the spring whenever it's actively growing, but just give it a restart. Just cut that thing, to the ground.
Give it a haircut. Because our next question is, when's the best time to plant a limelight hydrangea?
Let's see. 3:30?
Yep, correct, Josh.
Yes.
You got it.
Yes.
Nailed
Good as
it.
any time.
Yeah, you can do it at any time, but the best time to plant really the best time to plant it is during dormancy. So over the wintertime, whenever they're just sticks. I know they just look like sticks and they look like they're probably dead, but they're just dormant. And they will wake up in the spring. It's probably it's the least stressful on the plant. It's the least stressful on you. You don't have to water near as much. I know they're in full bloom right now, and we're selling hydrangea like crazy because they're in bloom. People see them. They want them in their yard. I get it. And planting right now, there's nothing wrong with that at all. Just do know you're going to have to be watering. You're going to have to get out there and water. Hydrangea will tell you when it's dry. It will wilt hard.
Yeah. Wow.
The blooms will even wilt on it. It's
Dry up and turn brown a little bit.
and they can go quick. If a hydrangea dies quickly, it's because it didn't have enough water. Simply put, there's no like pests or pathogens that are going to take this plant quickly. So if you buy one now and a week later it looks like it's dying, then it's because it's not getting enough water. Hydra is in the name of hydrangea, so it certainly needs it. If you do plant it, make sure you water it.
Do they suffer windburn worse than other things going home from the nursery?
Yeah, they kind of do. They don't like it. So, we actually were talking about doing a video yesterday of watching people load their own plants. Some people want to load their own plants, okay? They're weird about it. I don't know why. We are expert plant loaders in vehicles. Some people don't want our help. They want to just load their own stuff.
They're touchy about the beds of their truck.
They are. They can be.
Standing in my bed.
So a lot of times they'll leave trees or shrubs standing up in the bed of their truck or whatever, and then they go down the road and the wind will knock it down or just wind burn the heck out of it. What's really bad? Redbud trees are well known. They get shredded on the way home if you don't do that properly. So we have to lay those plants down. Sometimes we tie them up with twine to get them real tight. We call it the old loop and swoop, and we'll do that for you. And like I said, we're experts at it. So don't go out of here with your plants just blowing in the breeze, going 50,
all
60
day,
down
every
Briley.
Because they're and they're heavy too, aren't they? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The blooms, especially. The blooms will certainly get affected if you don't take them home properly.
But it takes more deliberate effort, laying them down, tying them up, even putting like a tarp over a mesh type tarp, preferably, or something that is breathable. You don't want it cooking underneath there.
And then
don't
stop at the grocery store. Really.
you can absolutely roast them if you're not careful. So there are a lot of conditions that have to be met properly in order to transport them best.
We don't want to roast our plants. I've seen so many house plants on the internet that have been roasted sitting in a car for like 10 minutes in the summer. They think they can run in and get something and don't crack their windows. I mean, especially house plants, because those leaves are so tender and they're not used to a lot of sun. They will turn black really, really
And they don't
quickly.
like 140 degrees.
In your car.
Right, we do have another hydrangea question, so let's stay on it. So one of our viewers is asking, they have an endless summer hydrangea that has rust, and they say they have sprayed copper fungicide quite a few times, but it is still a problem. Suggestions? What should they do?
Sounds like a need for another type of fungicide to me.
If you can prune out rust, that's the best way to do it. And you're going to lose some leaves, obviously. But, the Endless Summer Collection hydrangeas have a lot of leaves, and they're usually pretty full. So if it's just a little, say 10% of the leaves have rust on them, taking them physically off is the first step. I mean, really, you can control a lot of fungal issues by just observing it. And if you see it first, right when you see a rust spot or a powdery mildew spot on a leaf, taking that leaf off immediately is going to be the best way to stop the spread of that.
And wasting it away. Don't just drop it at the bottom of the plant.
No, certainly not. Yeah, definitely. Get rid of all those leaves.
And rust is one of the most difficult pathogens to deal with. It's very hard to do much with it spraying wise. It almost has to be physically removed in order to get a clean start, where that if it comes back, if you can catch it early, it's a lot more manageable. If it's gotten in there at an infestation level, you have very limited choices.
That's true, because fungicides don't cure what you've got on those leaves. It stops it from spreading a little bit, and it's helpful with that. But it doesn't stop what's on the leaves. That's gonna persist and be there. So it's best to just get rid of that if you can. A good little tip too over the winter time is whenever all the leaves are removed, let's be very clean and get all those old leaves up and away from the stems of the plant. And then let's get a dormant horticultural oil that you can coat on those stems that will help with some of those leftover spores that are going to overwinter on the stems. So coating that really well with an oil will more or less suffocate kind of whatever's on there. Even like eggs from bugs, you can kind of kill over the wintertime with a dormant oil. So that's a good practice to use too when you have fungus issues.
Very good.
My 15-year-old mop heads had been hit by the December frost. I have given them time, but they still look really thin. Will they recover, or should I consider replacing?
Are these teenage boys that we're talking about?
Yeah.
We're going to replace those teenage boys.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mop heads, I'm assuming this is hydrangea, the big, round blue or pink blooming hydrangeas. We typically call those mop heads. And yeah, they got a little thin, especially if they're 15 years old. I mean, that's pretty good. I don't think they're necessarily going to die or anything. What I think you ought to do probably over this wintertime is go in and let's give them a good cleanup. So a 15-year-old hydrangea certainly probably has some dead wood in it. We need to remove that. The 3 Ds, if you will, of pruning, which is diseased, dying, or
Dead.
Dead.
Yes.
Yeah. No.
You looked sad when you were thinking of that word.
Yeah. So any of those old canes that are really off color or just very old, let's go ahead and remove those, and let's go ahead and thin it out. I don't want you to prune your mop heads too much because, as we know, they bloom off old wood. So we got to keep that wood up. So keep all the healthiest looking stems and take anything that looks like it's diseased or dying and get rid of all that. Open it up a little bit. And let's just wait till next spring to see how they kind of leaf back out, because I don't think they're necessarily dead, but they could probably use a cleanup.
Some of my hydrangeas look sad after the freeze. And I know next year they'll look great. And our final hydrangea question of the morning. Limelight hydrangea planted last fall was beautiful in May and June, and now is totally flopped. Next step. I do want to jump in really quickly. I know I talked about this last week, but I took Austin's advice on one of my my Limelight hydrangeas, and did cut it back early April. And now my other 2 that I have are flopping. I mean, they look great, but they're just really heavy. And the one that I did cut on has tighter blooms like Austin suggested, and it's not flopping. They're all growing up top, and it is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, doesn't your mom have a patio tree that you trim back and by that fashion and give us a report on how it's looking now?
Yeah, well, I did that last year. I actually didn't get to it this year. Sorry, Mama.
Oh, no.
Got him.
Hers looks really good this year, but like everybody else's this year, it's been a wet summer, so those blooms are flopping, and they just are. It's, they're still beautiful, but yeah, it is kind of annoying to see the flop on that. So what Caroline's talking about is what my approach to hydrangeas have been, which is cut them back like we normally would over the wintertime. Let's shorten the sticks a lot. Let's get any stems that are really like smaller than a pencil size or something, like, weak looking stems. Let's remove those over the winter. That's just our normal pruning. But then, like I said, and what Caroline said, and it's whenever in the spring they come out with their leaves, and you get about 3 or 4 leaf sets up. You get a stem that comes up, I don't know, about a foot and a half, and then let's cut that in half in the early spring. I know it sounds weird to do that because they have leaves and they're actively growing, but if you do that early, you will set yourself up for something better later. And what that is a 2 to 3 week later bloom period, and also smaller blooms on your hydrangeas, but they don't flop near as bad, and you have a lot more blooms. So let's try to do that next year. Let's be the people out here in Nashville that are doing what they need to do with their hydrangeas.
That's right. I mean, I love it. Mine is so upright and tight and just very controlled.
And a lot of blooms, right?
I mean, there is, after all, a lot of hydrangea pressure here in Music City. We have so many visitors that come from all over that there's nothing worse than having flopping hydrangeas, and we need to make the best impression we possibly can.
That's right.
Well, what do they think we are? Austin, Texas, or something like that? Come on.
Well, I don't
Step
know.
up,
Austin can't compare with respect to hydrangeas, I don't believe, because it's
Austin
just
can't
much
compare
too hot
to
there.
anything.
Yeah, I don't know if they even grow hydrangeas down there, to be honest
No.
with you.
Really? That's
I
where
don't
you're
know.
from.
It is. Well,
Well, hey, y'all, speaking of Austin, we have a question about Austin.
Texas or me?
You. Are you ready?
Uh-oh.
I'm an admirer of Austin and his good looks. If he were a plant, what plant would he be?
Mama
It's
wouldn't
Mom.
even say that.
What would you be?
What would I be? A crisp,
You'd be a
perfect
rose.
white rose.
I called it. You'd be a crisp, perfect. I would say
You know
more
what?
like
I
a.
was going to
Boxwood.
say a crisp, burnt Justin Brown.
Thanks, Tyler.
I would have described him as bamboo because he's up and grows tall and gets around quickly. So
That is-
Oh, true.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
The At Home Show is brought to you by EarthMix Garden Products, creating high-quality, sustainable soil blends and amendments in the Southeast. It's hot and your plants need some mulch. Why not use Fines by EarthMix? Their finely shredded pine bark mulch offers unmatched moisture control and fantastic texture in your garden. Not only a great mulch, but an excellent soil conditioner to assist with drainage in beds and containers. Visit earthmix.net for more information and a list of retailers near you. Remember, success begins at the ground level when you choose EarthMix Garden Products. And you know what EarthMix gives you? Blooms. And you know what Austin tells you? What's in bloom? With Austin. All right.
All right.
Austin.
Here we go. What's blooming? What are y'all seeing? There ain't too many trees going on right now.
Trumpet vine.
More, yeah, trumpet vine's definitely blooming. There's more of the same with trees. Crepe myrtle's still going. It's crepe myrtle season. They're great. They look beautiful. Rosa Sharon right along with
Myrtled
them,
out,
looking good,
if you will.
Myrtled out.
With that, Rosa Sharon is technically hibiscus, and perennial hibiscus still popping off. They're kind of annoying. I know mine is because it has a bloom every day, and then it drops that bloom every single night or in the morning. So the leaf or the bloom litter beneath the plant is something you got to pick up. So that
Sounds so
part of
annoying.
it is annoying. It's annoying.
annoyed.
They're slimy
What a
old
burden.
blooms.
You are the tidiest gardener I do know. So
I'm fairly
I don't know if
tidy.
our
I got a
viewers
little
know
weeds
that.
going on right now. I got to get in there and do some work. Not too many. Anyway, mimosas are still going. They're certainly pretty. And you know what I saw this morning, which is weird? A magnolia. A good old southern
yeah.
magnolia still throwing a few blooms. That's cool. It's been a long time them blooming. God, they smell so good. Hydrangeas, obviously, all the questions today have been about hydrangea. Those are certainly blooming and also flopping. So, fun. Perennials, we got Echinacea and Black-Eyed Susan just about to finish up, okay? They've got a lot of dead heads you need to get rid of. Those two are the most annoying to me because they'll still be blooming, but they've also got all these black old flowers that are spent that you got to go in and clean up. And if you have a big stand of Black-Eyed Susan, this is going to take some time. Yeah, the blooms are starting to turn black. They need to be removed. That's part of it. We've got milkweed that blooms orange, great for the monarch
Boom.
Butterflies. Those are still showing off. Goldenrod is that yellow
Boom.
pollinator plant. It's fantastic for all of our insects that we need, all of our butterflies and all that good stuff. Ironweed is that big, tall, growing purple weed that is going right now. It kind of just started, yeah, like it's the beginning of that show. But that's another great pollinator plant. And then Joe Pye weed. That's another one. This plant can live in a very wet site, so good for a pollinating rain garden, if you will. All of your grasses are going off right now. Grass has been a good season for grasses. My Northwind switchgrass is just fantastic. Me and Caroline were talking before the show. Hers is really big this year, and it's only a second year planting for hers. Mine have been in for 4 years now, so they're beefy.
And mine are bigger than yours already.
Yeah,
Wow.
mine are picture perfect. Okay. Last on my list is the sunflowers. God, it's been a good sunflower year. I've already mentioned it, but they are really, really pretty this year. Everybody's had good luck with them. You know, sunflowers can get kind of fungusy on their lower leaves, and just because their lower leaves don't look all that good, that doesn't mean that bloom set atop is not really pretty this year. So don't think you got to get rid of your sunflowers if they have a little fungus on the lower leaves or those lower leaves are looking rough. Just remove them and then enjoy that bloom that sits atop because it's been a great year for them. Mm-hmm. So there you go. That's what's blooming.
Perfect. Love it.
Wow.
Wow. Amazing.
All of that.
Let's get back to some questions.
Okay.
Do it.
I broke a limb off my Chinese wisteria tree. Do I need to put anything on it to make sure it does not kill it?
No.
No. Not at
You
all.
can do cosmetic stuff, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't worry about it.
No. You ain't hurting that thing. Trust me.
You ain't hurting that thing. All right, let's talk about hurting some soil.
Okay.
Does adding gypsum to heavy clay soils help break it up and make the soil lighter?
Gypsum doesn't really change the density of the soil as much as it changes the properties of it so that the particulate components of the soil, or actually it can become more particulate, is what I mean to say. There's a very high density in clay type soil, so it comes together. Gypsum does
Kind of break.
perform additives to the soil that helps to break those bonds up. Another thing that helps is the actual incorporation of particulate organic matter. So using a product such as Earth Mix Supernatural, or even fines, which is just
pine fines,
finely ground pine fines, incorporated into your soil will do a lot towards that, specifically on plants. Now, we're not talking about a turf application here.
Additional support for the At Home Show is brought to you by Bates Nursery, a third-generation garden center located in Nashville, Tennessee, offering the widest selection of plants and gardening supplies from large trees to houseplants, from seeds to soil. Their knowledgeable staff will assist you with all your gardening needs. Open year-round, minutes from the heart of Nashville and beautiful Whites Creek, Tennessee. Browse their selection online anytime at batesnursery.com. Bates Nursery and Garden Center, beautifying Nashville since 1932. How about, can you overwinter Boston ferns by bringing them inside? How do you keep them alive? So with Boston ferns, you do have a couple different options. You can bring it inside and you can try to keep it alive. One of our seasonal greenhouse workers, Patty, has one that she's had, I think, for about 3 years. That is huge. I saw it at her house and it's cascading down her wall. It's hanging in front of some windows. So that's an option to just keep it alive, keep it growing, water it, and just care for it pretty much the same as you do when it's outside. Or you can let it go dormant. When you do this, you're going to want to cut off all of the leaves, just almost all the way back to the soil line. If you've got a garage or a nice dark place, you can let it sit in there. Make sure it doesn't get down to freezing. So if it's a cold night, you'll want it to be a little bit heated in there. And then water it every so often so it doesn't sit super, super dry. And then in the spring, you can bring it out, fertilize it, thoroughly water it, and it'll start growing back. We have a question from Miriam. Good morning, Miriam.
Hi, Miriam.
Yay. What's the best way to grow moss in an area where there's no grass? How is it sold?
There's only a few mosses. I guess, we sell Irish moss and Scotch moss. Those
Correct.
are two that we sell that are available. Other than that, moss just kind of grows where moss wants to grow, and that's typically in like shady, moist environments. But if you do want to grow Irish moss and Scotch moss, they're both beautiful, beautiful little plants, but that is the MO of what they want. They want a shady, moist location almost all the time.
Any tips on replanting a fiddleleaf fig? Best time of year, soil, etc. Repotting that fiddleleaf fig, you'd want to go ahead and do it now. They do respond best to repotting when the days are still long. I find when I repot my fiddleleaf figs, they can sense fear, so don't get scared when you do it, and don't think about it too much, because they're going to know both of those.
Don't tell them in advance
Don't
either.
let them know you're going to do it, because if they find any of this out, if they sense it, those leaves are going to drop. Go up just a little bit. They like to be pretty tight in their pot, so if it's a 10-inch pot right now, go ahead and go into maybe a 12-inch. And as far as soil goes, I usually use just an indoor mix. I use the Earth Mix Proganics I, but I will also mix in perlite, maybe some pine fines. And one thing I've started doing is mixing in orchid bark mix. It's got charcoal, it's got larger perlite, and then big pieces of pine bark. And it responds really well to that. It likes to have kind of chunky soil. So you'll want to go ahead and have that pot ready, pull that fiddleleaf fig out, maybe loosen the roots a little bit if it is super root bound, plant it. And the biggest thing is to thoroughly water it once you have it in that new pot. Really drench it, make sure water comes out of the bottom of the pot, and then don't look at it for weeks and it will be fine.
Because it's going to be mad at you anyway.
It's probably not going to notice if you do it really fast. Let's talk about trees, shall we? Your opinion on crab apple trees. All yellow leaves normal?
No. Yellow's typically not a good color in plants, so it's probably, if they're all yellow leaves but they're persisting on the plant and they're not dropping off, then it's probably nitrogen deficient, which is the very number one cause of yellowing leaves that stay on a plant. So you might need to fertilize that plant with a high, first number on the fertilizer label. Every fertilizer label has 3 different numbers on it, and that first one is nitrogen, and that is for green growth. So we might need to do that because yellow leaves on a crabapple are not common. They should be pretty green right now.
I have volunteer pecan and black walnut trees that I want to transplant, but how and when?
Okay. Just like pretty much anything when it comes to transplanting, we're going to do this during dormancy. Let those plants just grow this year and let them get as many leaves as they can. Let those leaves drop over the winter like they're going to do, and then that's when you dig them. And whenever you dig them, dig a bigger root ball than you think you should, okay? I mean, even little seedlings, get more of a root, but try to get as much of that root as you can. That's the biggest key.
Right.
We're going to do that. We're going to pot it up, and we're going to keep it in somewhat of a protected location, maybe just kind of, close to your home or something where it's not just getting horrible winds and extreme weather. Just kind of do that. But other than that, that's pretty easy. Pecans have a very long long taproot. So you got to go deep with a pecan tree, okay? Out of all the trees that we sell, pecans come in this pot. It's like a 7-gallon.
You can't even see his hands. It's so big. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like it's a tall pot because it's got that long taproot. So make sure that you go a little bit deeper than what you would think too. But it can certainly be done. Let's do it over the winter.
Yeah, and a little pro tip that people might want to consider if you're transplanting, and we're talking in the Thanksgiving time of year when things are completely dormant and you're going to perhaps just dig them out and bare root them. And this is particularly good for smaller trees and other natives that perhaps are collecting to redo. This is back in the day, a secondary hole would be dug and make a mud hole out of it. And what that would be used for is when you bare root one of these small trees, you immediately take it over and put those roots and coat them in mud. And what that does is that keeps that root system from dehydrating and causing damage to the tree. Now, once you mud them, you can put them over in the shade, and they can sit there for quite a while. Back before they had perhaps good ways of storing them, this was a really widely accepted method. So mudding those roots and getting them coated up is a great way to do that. One thing you might want to be mindful of if you're transplanting walnuts is walnuts are not always a really good tree to use around anything else.
Yes,
there are a great many plants that are do not like the chemical that's called juglone that is produced in all parts of walnuts, black walnuts especially. And it can be a toxin to them. So do your research on that. If you're going to transplant them where you have other desirable things, it might be a problem.
Very, very messy tree too.
Yep. Hardy. All
right, speaking of hardy, let's talk about yews. I know these are super hardy plants. Yew shrubs, how far down can I safely trim, and when is the best time to do it?
Roughly around that February time, that's kind of when we do our evergreen pruning for the most part to kind of get them in check. Now before they leave, you're gonna trim them back, and they're gonna look a little stemmy, after you do that, and they'll look a little rough, going into the spring season. But if you get those cleaned up and chopped down, you don't want to go too far. Typically with yews, they're kind of a hedge plant, so you kind of get them to where you want them to be, and then you start trimming them every season to kind of keep them where you want them. I wouldn't say go halfway down the plant, although if you have to, you certainly can, because yews are very, very hardy plants as well, and they're going to come back just fine. So.
All right, and our final question of the morning: what fall veggies are happiest in Nashville? So many.
Depends on the weather. I'll go ahead and say that. But any of them can be. Get them through when they're young. Make sure you check for those cabbage loopers and cabbage worms. If you can get a young transplant big enough in the fall, then you'll have a nice harvest typically. But when summertime rolls around, those cabbage moths, they're little white, blowing in the breeze moths. They'll come in laying eggs on your veggies when they're young. If you can avoid that and get them up big, then really most of the fall crops are going to be fine. Your broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts,
beets
that Josh likes and nobody else does.
No, I love them too.
Okay.
And our weather conditions for late summer, early fall look very promising for those kinds of plants. But then just a very few weeks, we'll be having those starts coming in.
I think we might have some coming next week.
Oh, my goodness. Well, hey, tell you what, folks, it's been fun this morning.
Yeah.
Let's come back next Saturday morning and do another one. What do you think, guys? Y'all in?
I think it's a good idea.
Okay. All righty, folks. Go out, subscribe to the podcast. Go and like the Facebook page. Like everything about the At Home Show. Share it and let us know that we come on. It's at Saturday mornings at 8 o'clock. It's been doing that quite a while, David. So we'll be here for you. Yep. Green Room Studios next Saturday. See you. Bye.